This week's chapter of My Hero Academia was very interesting, and most of the chapter was basically a flashback, but it was a very cool flashback, and we're seeing exactly what happened while Stain was breaking out of Tartarus about a month ago, the story says, and we're finally seeing what happened there, and it's very interesting what goes on in this chapter, so we're going to jump right into where it starts off. The chapter starts off with us seeing that a random criminal has also broken out and he's free, and he's basically yelling women, women, women. He's saying that, he can't believe that he's finally out and he's going to basically be able to do whatever he wants, and that gets shut down instantly by Stain, who gets a just a random piece of metal or glass or something, and he instantly cuts the dude's throat and kills him. So luckily that dude isn't going to be let back onto the streets, but we then see Stain is basically sneaking his way around the facility, and he doesn't really understand what's going on. There's no communication with the outside world while you're in Tartarus, so he doesn't know what's going on out there. He doesn't know that there's been this big war, that Shigaraki and All For One are basically loose, and he doesn't know any of this, so he's wondering, like, oh, so something must have happened. Tartarus has fallen, and he's saying that something outside must have occurred to have this happen. He then says that he needs more information, and he walks into the guard's room, and he says that everybody else around the room has seemingly died with, a weapon in their hand, but then there's this one guy that's just curled up into a ball, no weapon in his hand, and he's trying to hide something, or he's curled up clutching something in his hands, and Shigaraki, or Stain, notices this. He walks up to the guard, and the guard also says, "Why am I holding this instead of a weapon?" And Stain notices that his breathing is withered. He can tell that he's on his last legs, and he just says that, "I need information." And the guard says his name and says, "Don't give this to any of Shigaraki's followers, just don't do that." Stain is wondering, is it something important? And the guard says that it's a recording device, and he says, "Don't kill people." All he wants him to do is to return it to a just person, somebody that could use this information and not try and do anything bad or harmful with it. And he says, make sure to give it back to them and don't hand it off to the wrong side. Just don't do it, or it would destroy the present that we have now. And Stain says, don't worry, he can be assured that he's going to give it to a just person, and we all know who Stain ended up giving it to, and it was definitely the most just person he could have given it to. But we all know that, since this is a flashback, but it's just cool that even then Stain had no ulterior motives. He just wanted to make sure this got to All Might. We then get a cool panel where the guard is saying his name. He's like, "Akaguro, are you a man or a monster?" And Stain says, "Only those who strive for a completely just world are monsters." And we get a really cool panel with him just looking back at the guard, full of determination, and it's just very cool seeing him in this scene. After this, we get a panel of seemingly All For One and Shigaraki basically hyping up the escapees and telling them, probably to follow us and do what we say, and, you'll be free and liberated and stuff like that. And after this, we see Stain was also looking in on this, and he doesn't want to get involved. He's definitely not going to follow All For One or Shigaraki or any of them. He's not going to do that. And he starts saying that the man's name that he doesn't know, the guard, was trying so desperately to save this information, and basically Stain is saying that, it has to be something extremely important, and he's saying that's why I'm gonna pass this on to the only person I know I can trust. And he we all know this is All Might, and this is the only person he feels that can get it. And he says, "Because you are the one who started all of this." And we cut back to seemingly the present, and we see All Might basically looking over the information, and he also lets Tsukauchi see the information also. He then comments that, has Midoriya basically come together with all his other classmates? Is he fine now? Is he with them? And he also comments on the fact that they got some great information that's very helpful, but he doesn't like the fact that it came from, in his words, a vile person, which is Stain, which Stain has done a lot of bad things in the past, but you can't lie. He has a very backwards way of kind of doing it, but he is trying to, in a way, help the world, and this is definitely something very good, because he very easily could have just kept that information to himself, but he definitely wants to see the world in a better place. It's just the way he goes about it can be seen as very villainous and very bad, but he has good intentions in the end. He then comments on the fact that the bowels of Tartarus were heavily damaged from the outside and the inside during the fight because of radio waves from Shigaraki and All For One seemingly. And one of the other officers says that All For One was residing within Shigaraki Tomura, and he's saying that this was basically a very synchronized attack since they were able to communicate with each other with radio waves without even having to be next to each other or anywhere near each other or have any communication device. All Might then comments on this, saying that he had a similar experience with All For One, and he's saying that the problem is that he can't really communicate both ways with that ability from All For One. And we basically see like a diagram where he's saying that he is able to communicate thoughts to the spiritual All For One, but he isn't able to get anything from the spirit All For One, and any information that he can decipher or listen to or anything like that. So it's kind of like a one-way thing where he can talk to them, but he can't receive any information back. He then comments that there was one instance where when he was touching Midoriya, he was able to actually receive memories from the spiritual All Might, and he was able to actually identify this information, and he was able to gain something from it. He then theorizes that if All For One is able to use this ability too with a greater synchronicity than One For All, he would definitely be able to communicate with his real body while he's still inside of Shigaraki technically, and be able to perfectly talk with that real body and basically have like two versions of him out at the same time, which is very insane that he's able to do that, because when you think about it, it's like having two consciousness present in the world at the same time, since his version of his consciousness inside of Shigaraki is able to basically tell his real body to do this and do that. That's very scary, and the fact that they're able to do it with radio waves and not even have to speak or anything is very scary, since at any point they can just be giving each other information and nobody would know. They then comment on the fact that the final radio waves that they were able to get from that altercation had a seemingly a conversation going on in the radio waves. They could see that, and the one officer, the cat-looking one, was saying that you were able to parse the data right, and he says to find out what they were saying, and he's like, yeah, it says that he will be completed in 38 days. And the officer's confused. He's like, what? He comments that this doesn't really match up with the information that they got from Central Headquarters, and All Might is basically saying that the result of this, that this information will lead to nothing significant. And he says that if we believe that the hidden medium of communication between Shigaraki's real body and his consciousness really does exist, he's saying then Shigaraki is no more than a vessel, and he will be completed in 3 days. Basically saying that in 3 days' time, Shigaraki is going to be in full force, and he's going to be way more powerful than he even was during the war arc. And we already saw just what he was able to do with an uncompleted body during that entire altercation. After we finish this All Might talking and we learn about how Shigaraki seemingly going to be completed in 3 days, we cut to a sort of headquarters, and we're seeing that there's a bunch of different world leaders here, and they're all talking about how bad the situation has become. One of them says that they heard about everything personally from All Might, and they say, but to send reinforcements by tomorrow is impossible, and the foreign heroes who can be dispatched tend to not follow orders when they are called to help internationally, basically saying that whenever they have to go to a different country, they don't really care, I guess, about what's going to happen since it's not their country. And they're basically talking about the problems with sending large forces of heroes to a different country, saying that while those heroes are gone and at the other country, that kind of disturbs the equilibrium, and that causes people or villains or bad people back in that country to kind of show up more, since now there's less people to stop them from doing crimes or doing anything bad. So they're just talking about how it's very hard to just send heroes to a different country. He also says that every time they dispatch a very large number of heroes to a different country, it doesn't really do anything but revitalize syndicates that'll come out of hiding, basically reiterating his section that he says before, that whenever they're gone, more bad people show up. He also mentions that seemingly every country's in a form of chaos or turmoil right now, and they're basically saying that this is most likely because All For One has his tendrils, or he has his influence in nearly every single country in the world. And that does make sense. He'd definitely be able to have influence everywhere in the world at one time. Then another one of the leaders basically says that, well, if All Might, All For One, or All Might, Hawks, and Devereaux, if all of them say that they need help and they need heroes to come over, then they definitely can't really say no. They know that it's a very dire situation, and he's saying that they basically have to send somebody over. We then see who we can seemingly assume is the president of the United States, at least in this world, or somebody higher up in the US, and he says that she's already departed, and everybody's confused. They're like, who's already departed? What are you talking about? And he's saying that one of ours, she's incredibly impatient, and she left in order to blow everything away. And they're basically, then we see a panel at the end, and it's very cool, very awesome, and we learn that this is the #1 hero in the United States, and her name is Star and Stripes. She then mentions that this was a direct request from All Might, and she says that my master's in trouble and we can't waste the moments of time. And we learn that this is the #1 hero, of course, and she looks very cool. She looks literally just like a female version of All Might, so we can definitely tell that she's a big fan of the dude. And it's almost kind of crazy, like this is just alternate universe All Might if he just happened to be a female. And she definitely seems to have a very big presence, and we can assume that her being the #1 hero of the United States and being at least a student of All Might, from all that we know, we don't know her ability yet, but we can just assume that she's going to be very, very powerful. And that line from before, they were saying that she's here to basically blast everything away, is very telling of how strong she is, and she's just coming over here to help out her mentor and wipe the floor with whoever stands in her way. I honestly can't wait for next week. I really want to see, and I really hope that we do get a bit more information on her, and maybe we'll even learn what her quirk is, or how she's able to basically just blast everybody away. And I definitely want to know more about her, since she's a student of All Might, and we're finally really getting into the idea that there's other heroes out there in the world, and we're finally getting to go out of Japan and see other heroes from different nations and see how strong they are, how powerful, or what powers they have. Maybe things are a bit different over there, and it's very interesting, and I really do want to see what happens next. But that's all for this chapter this week, and basically this was a very good chapter, and I'm just so hyped for this new character that's here. But like the video if you liked it, and please subscribe. It will always help me out, and I very much appreciate it if you would do that. But thank you for watching the video, and I'm out.